The conference room felt smaller than usual, not because of the beige walls or the artificial ficus tree in the corner, but because of the three people sitting across from me: VP of Operations, Legal Counsel, and someone from HR I'd never seen before. "Catherine, we appreciate your 15 years of service, but we're downsizing the technology division." I watched his mouth move, watched the way his left eye twitched just slightly when he said downsizing. The same tell he had during quarterly reviews when the numbers didn't match his promises to the board. 48 hours. That's all that stood between me and my stock options vesting. 15 years of 80-hour weeks, of midnight server crashes, of holding together a $300 million tech infrastructure with code I'd written from scratch. 48 hours. The VP, his name was Bradley Hutchinson, slid a severance package across the table. His wedding ring clicked against his coffee mug. I didn't reach for the papers. "Your access will be revoked at close of business today," he continued. "We'll need your credentials and all company devices." That's when I saw it. The smallest upturn at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile, but close enough. Before we continue, I want to take a moment to thank everyone who's been part of this journey. We just hit our first milestone, and now we're reaching toward 2,000 subscribers. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt invisible in a system that should value your contribution, consider subscribing. No pressure, just an invitation to be part of a community that believes everyone's story matters. Now, back to that conference room. My name is Catherine Mitchell, Chief Technology Architect. That was my official title anyway. In reality, I was the skeleton key that unlocked every digital door into Sarah Solutions, a mid-sized tech consultancy firm that had grown from 12 employees to over 300 during my tenure. I didn't come from money. My father was a high school chemistry teacher, my mother a hospital administrator. But they taught me something more valuable than trust funds or connections. They taught me to see people, really see them. The janitor who worked third shift to put his daughter through college. The secretary who'd been at the company longer than most executives, but was still introduced as just the admin. The junior developers whose ideas got absorbed into someone else's presentations without credit. Empathy wasn't a weakness in my world. It was a navigation system. I grew up in a 3-bedroom ranch house in Ohio where the biggest luxury was the above-ground pool my dad installed himself over one summer. My parents never made me feel like we were lacking anything, but I understood early that nothing came without effort. Scholarship applications for college, work-study programs, late nights in the university computer lab because I couldn't afford my own laptop until junior year. When I got hired at Sarah Solutions fresh out of grad school, I was their second IT person. The company had just landed a contract with a healthcare consortium, and their infrastructure was held together with duct tape and prayers. I rebuilt it from the ground up. 15 years later, I was the only person who truly understood how everything connected. The legacy systems I'd integrated, the custom applications I'd developed, the security protocols I'd designed, the cloud architecture that housed client data worth hundreds of millions. I'd trained others, of course, built a team of 12 talented engineers. But the core systems, the ones that required root access and administrative privileges that could bring everything down or keep it running, those lived in my head and my encrypted files. Bradley Hutchinson had been VP of Operations for 3 years. He'd arrived from a failed startup with a golden parachute and an inflated sense of his own technical understanding. He knew enough vocabulary to sound competent in meetings, not enough to actually do anything. We'd clashed exactly 3 times in those 3 years. Once, when he wanted to cut the cybersecurity budget by 40%. I'd gone over his head to the CEO with a risk assessment that made the legal team go pale. Once, when he'd promised a client a deliverable timeline that was physically impossible. I'd made it happen, but only by pulling my team through 72 hours of continuous work. No thank you, no acknowledgement. And once, 6 months ago, when he'd tried to take credit for an infrastructure upgrade I'd designed. I'd simply forwarded the email chain to the entire leadership team showing the year of development work. His presentation the next day had been notably shorter. I should have seen this coming. "The severance package is quite generous," the HR representative said. Her nameplate read Jennifer Strauss. She had the kind of voice people use when delivering bad news they didn't personally create but have to own anyway. 60 days of salary, continuation of health benefits for 90 days, and a neutral reference for future employment. 60 days of salary. I did the math instantly. My stock options, set to vest in 48 hours, were worth approximately $107,000 based on the current company valuation. The options I'd negotiated 5 years ago when I'd turned down a higher-paying offer from a competitor. The options I'd been told were the company's way of rewarding loyalty. 60 days of salary didn't come close. "The non-compete clause remains in effect," the legal counsel added. His name was Arthur Chen, and I'd worked with him on contract reviews for years. He wouldn't meet my eyes. 18 months, standard restrictions. So I couldn't work for a competitor, couldn't solicit clients, couldn't even consult independently in the same sector. But they could terminate me 48 hours before a 6-figure vesting event. "I need to understand the timeline," I said quietly. "My stock options vest on Friday." Bradley's expression didn't change. "Unfortunately, company policy is clear. Only active employees receive vested options. Your termination is effective today, Wednesday, at close of business." There it was. The real reason for the Wednesday afternoon meeting. Not Friday after the vesting. Not Monday before the vesting period began. Wednesday. Maximum damage to me. Maximum savings to the company's equity pool. "How many others are being let go in this downsizing?" I asked. The question landed like a stone in still water. Jennifer shuffled papers. Arthur examined his pen. Bradley took a slow sip of coffee. "That information is confidential," Bradley finally said. "But rest assured, this is part of a comprehensive restructuring." I'd been with the company long enough to know what that meant. I pulled out my phone, opened the company directory, scrolled through the technology division. 47 people. I'd hired or trained most of them. "Who's taking over my responsibilities?" I asked. "We're distributing your duties among existing team members," Bradley said. "Your documentation should facilitate a smooth transition." My documentation. I almost laughed. I had documentation, certainly, thousands of pages of it. System diagrams, process flows, code repositories, configuration guides, everything properly organized and theoretically accessible to someone with the right clearances. But documentation is like a recipe. You can follow the steps exactly and still end up with something inedible if you don't understand the chemistry underneath. If you don't know that the oven runs 20 degrees hot, or that the flour from this particular supplier needs 5 minutes less mixing time, or that the altitude affects rising time. I'd been the chef for 15 years. They were about to hand my recipes to people who'd barely learned to boil water. "I'll need to spend time with the team," I said. "Transition planning, knowledge transfer. We're in the middle of the Prometheus client migration and—" "Your access ends at 5 p.m. today," Bradley interrupted. "We've prepared a transition plan. Your team leads have been briefed." 5 p.m. I glanced at my watch. It was 2:45. They were giving me 2 hours and 15 minutes to close out 15 years. The walk from the conference room to my office was exactly 73 steps. I'd paced it 1,000 times over the years, usually with my mind halfway into whatever problem I was solving. Server migrations, security patches, client emergencies. Now, I counted each step, felt each one. Heads turned as I passed cubicles. Word travels fast in an office, even without official announcements. Maybe it was my face. Maybe someone had seen me go into the conference room with HR. Maybe Bradley had already sent out an email I hadn't received yet. My office was a corner space on the third floor, not large, but mine. One window overlooking the parking lot, bookshelves filled with technical manuals and industry certifications, a whiteboard covered in network diagrams and system architecture sketches. My laptop sat on the desk. Company issued, encrypted with security protocols I'd personally designed. Next to it, my phone. Also encrypted. Also mine, technically, but purchased through the company plan. I sat down and opened my email. 347 unread messages. I'd been in that conference room for 45 minutes, and the world had kept spinning. One email stood out, sent 20 minutes ago from Bradley Hutchinson to the entire leadership team. Subject line: Organizational changes in technology division. I opened it. Effective immediately, Catherine Mitchell will be departing Tessera Solutions to pursue other opportunities. We thank her for her years of service and wish her well in her future endeavors. Technology operations will continue without interruption under the leadership of... I stopped reading. Pursue other opportunities. The same phrase they'd used when they fired the CFO for whistleblowing about accounting irregularities. The same phrase they'd used when they pushed out the director of sales who'd reported sexual harassment. Corporate speak for, we made this person disappear, and we'd appreciate it if everyone pretended it was voluntary. I opened a new browser window and logged into the company's cloud infrastructure management portal. The dashboard loaded, showing the status of 372 active client environments. Green across the board. Uptime at 99.7%. Data transfer rates nominal. My team was good. They kept the trains running on time, but the tracks themselves, the switches, the signal systems, those were my domain. I opened a secure terminal window and began typing. Commands I'd written into the system architecture years ago. Fail-safes and security measures that weren't in any official documentation because they were designed for exactly one scenario: catastrophic security breach. If someone unauthorized gained root access to our systems, these protocols would lock everything down. Not destroy data. I wasn't a saboteur. But encrypt, isolate, and require multi-factor authentication to restore access. The kind of multi-factor authentication that required physical security keys and biometric verification and knowledge of system architecture that only one person possessed. I'd designed it to protect our clients, to ensure that even if the company was compromised, the data remained secure. I'd never imagined I'd be activating it against the company itself. A knock on my door frame. I looked up. Jason Rodriguez, one of my senior engineers. 28 years old, brilliant with database optimization, wore the same faded college hoodie at least twice a week. Is it true? He asked. I closed my laptop. Apparently, I'm pursuing other opportunities. That's garbage. He stepped into my office, lowered his voice. We all know what this is. Your options: vest, Friday. Friday doesn't matter if you're not here Thursday, I said. They can't do this. There has to be something, wrongful termination, or at-will employment, I said. They can fire me for any reason or no reason, as long as it's not discriminatory. And downsizing is legal. Jason's jaw tightened. What about the Prometheus migration? We're 3 days from go live, and you're the only one who understands the legacy authentication system. Prometheus was a healthcare client. 8 hospitals, 43 clinics, moving 15 years of patient data to a new cloud infrastructure. The kind of migration that could destroy a company if it went wrong. HIPAA violations, data breaches, patient care disruption. I'd been planning it for 9 months. Every detail mapped out, every contingency planned for, every rollback procedure documented and tested. The documentation is in the repository, I said. Everything you need is there. Catherine. He looked at me with an expression I'd seen before. The same look he'd had 2 years ago when his apartment building caught fire and he lost everything. That hollow desperation of someone watching their world shift and knowing they can't stop it. The documentation assumes we understand the foundation. Half of those systems were built before I even got here. Then you'll learn quickly, I said. You always do. More people appeared in my doorway. Angela Wu, my database administrator. Christopher Hunt, security specialist. Latasha Williams, who'd started as an intern 4 years ago and was now one of our best cloud engineers. This is insane, Angela said. You're the backbone of this entire operation. Backbones can be replaced, I said. That's what severance packages are for. Stop being professional about this, Christopher said. They screwed you. Everyone knows it. I glanced at the clock. 3:15. 1 hour and 45 minutes until my access expired. They did what companies do, I said carefully. They made a business decision. Now I need to make mine. What does that mean? Latasha asked. I met her eyes. Latasha was smart, ambitious, and still idealistic enough to believe that hard work and loyalty mattered. I'd been her age once. It means you should all document your contributions carefully, I said. Keep personal records of your projects, your innovations, your successes. Don't assume the company will remember or care. Protect yourselves. The words felt heavier than I intended. What about Prometheus? Jason pressed. Seriously, Catherine. Go live as Saturday morning. If something breaks, then you'll fix it, I said. That's what we do. That's what I trained you to do. They didn't look convinced. Neither was I. At 4:30, Bradley Hutchinson appeared at my door with a security guard I didn't recognize. We'll need to collect your equipment now, Bradley said. No preamble, no courtesy. I'd spent the last hour and 15 minutes doing exactly what they expected. Forwarding personal emails to my home account, downloading non-proprietary documents, cleaning out my desk drawers, the performance of departure. What I'd actually been doing was much more precise. Every system I'd built had layers. The visible layer that appeared in documentation and system diagrams, the functional layer that kept services running, and the foundation layer, the architecture that made everything else possible. I'd been methodically adjusting the foundation, not breaking anything, not deleting anything, not sabotaging anything, just reconfiguring access. The cloud infrastructure ran on a series of interconnected authentication services. Normally, a dozen people on my team had varying levels of administrative access. But all of that access flowed through a root authentication server that verified credentials and permissions. I'd modified the root authentication protocols. Specifically, I'd implemented a time-based security lockout, a feature I'd designed years ago for client emergencies but never activated company-wide. At exactly 5:01 p.m., 1 minute after my official termination, the system would require re-authentication from all administrative accounts. Normal re-authentication, except for one detail. The authentication keys were stored in an encrypted vault. The vault required biometric verification to unlock. My biometric verification. My fingerprint, specifically. Scanned through the secure token device that sat in my laptop bag. I'd designed it as a security feature. If I was ever incapacitated during a crisis, the system would lock down to prevent unauthorized access. My team leads had backup tokens, but those required my initial authorization to activate. It was elegant, really. A dead man's switch for the living. I stood up from my desk, closed my laptop lid, and unplugged the power cable. This needs to stay here, Bradley said, gesturing to the laptop. Of course. I set it on the desk. And your phone. I pulled my personal phone from my pocket. This is my personal device. Purchased through the company plan, Bradley said. Company property. Purchased by me, reimbursed through the company plan. Check your records. I'd specifically structured it that way 3 years ago during a policy update. Just in case. Bradley's jaw tightened, but he nodded to the security guard, who made a note on his tablet. Building access card, the guard said. I unclipped it from my belt and handed it over. My photo stared up from the laminated plastic. Younger face, different haircut. 15 years compressed into a rectangle of plastic and circuits. "Any other company property?" Bradley asked. I made a show of checking my desk drawers, my bag. "I don't think so." "The security token for system access," Bradley said. "The physical authentication device." My heart rate didn't change. Years of high-pressure situations had taught me to control my physiological responses. "I don't have it with me," I said. Which was true. It was in my car, in the parking lot, in my personal laptop bag. "It should be in the IT security cabinet. All the admin tokens are stored there." Another lie. My token had never lived in that cabinet. I'd kept it with me, always. Part of the security protocol I'd established. Bradley looked like he wanted to argue, but the clock was ticking toward 5 p.m., and he clearly wanted me gone. "We'll retrieve it from the cabinet," he said. "Let's finish the exit process." The exit interview took place in the same conference room where I'd been fired 3 hours earlier. Jennifer from HR walked through paperwork with the enthusiasm of someone reading a phone book. Cobra insurance options. 401k rollover procedures. Non-disclosure agreement reminders. The same script she probably delivered to everyone who left, whether they jumped or were pushed. "Do you have any company property we haven't collected?" she asked for the third time. "No." "Any questions about the severance agreement?" About 100, none of which she could answer in any meaningful way. "No." "Then if you'll just sign here, and initial here." I signed. What else was I going to do? Lawyer fees would eat through my savings before I got anywhere with wrongful termination claims, and they'd structured everything carefully enough that legal had already blessed it. The system wasn't designed for justice. It was designed for efficiency. At 4:58, the security guard escorted me through the building to the parking lot. People I'd worked with for over a decade suddenly found their computer screens fascinating. A few brave souls made eye contact. Jason gave me a small nod from his cubicle. The March air was colder than I expected. I'd left my jacket in my office. Former office. My car was a 7-year-old Honda Civic, parked in the same spot I'd been using for the past 3 years. Employee parking, Section C. I'd get here early enough to avoid the rush, late enough that the executives had already claimed their reserved spots. I unlocked the door, slid into the driver's seat, and sat there for a moment. Through the third-floor windows, I could see the lights of the technology department. My team would be there until at least 7, probably later. The Prometheus migration had them all running at maximum capacity. I checked my personal phone. 4:59. The company-issued laptop was still in Bradley's possession, but that didn't matter. The protocols I'd implemented didn't require me to be logged in. They were time-based, triggered by the system clock. 5 o'clock. Somewhere in the building, HR would be processing my termination in the system. My email account would be disabled. My network credentials would be revoked. My name would be removed from active employee directories. 5:01. The authentication lockout would engage. I started my car and pulled out of the parking lot. Traffic was moderate for a Wednesday evening. I took the long way home, the route that avoided highways and stoplights in favor of tree-lined residential streets. My phone rang at 5:17. Jason Rodriguez. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again at 5:19. Angela Wu. 5:22. Christopher Hunt. 5:28. A number I didn't recognize, but with the company's area code. I turned off my phone. My apartment was exactly as I'd left it that morning. Coffee mug in the sink. Laptop on the kitchen table. The accumulated evidence of a life lived mostly at the office. I made tea. Chamomile, something my mother always swore by for stress, and sat on my couch. The silence felt loud. For 15 years, my evenings had been punctuated by email notifications, text messages, emergency calls. Infrastructure didn't respect work-life balance, Servers crashed at 2 a.m. Security threats emerged on weekends. Client emergencies happened during vacation. I'd been tethered to that company through 1,000 invisible threads, and they'd just cut every single one in a conference room that smelled like stale coffee and corporate anxiety. My personal laptop sat on the table. I opened it, connected to my home network, and pulled up the news. Nothing yet. But it was early. The authentication lockout wouldn't cause immediate catastrophe. Existing sessions would continue running. Active services would keep processing. To anyone not trying to make administrative changes, everything would appear normal. But the moment someone tried to modify a configuration, deploy an update, access a restricted system, or respond to any kind of technical issue requiring elevated privileges, they'd hit a wall. A polite error message. Authentication required. Please verify credentials. They'd enter their credentials. The system would reject them. They'd try again. Same result. They'd check their password manager, reset their passwords, follow every troubleshooting step in the documentation. Nothing would work. Because the system wasn't rejecting their passwords. It was rejecting their authority to authenticate without my biometric verification. I imagined Jason at his desk, trying to make a routine update to the Prometheus staging environment. Christopher attempting to review security logs. Angela running a database maintenance script. All of them hitting the same wall, over and over. My phone, still turned off, sat next to my laptop. I could turn it on. I could answer the calls. I could walk them through the solution. I drank my tea instead. I slept better than expected. Maybe exhaustion, maybe shock, maybe the simple absence of the stress I'd been carrying for 15 years without fully recognizing it. Thursday morning arrived with pale sunlight through my apartment windows. I made coffee, toasted a bagel, and allowed myself the luxury of breakfast without checking email. At 8:15, I turned on my phone. 47 missed calls, 63 text messages, 112 emails. I scrolled through the texts first. Jason. Catherine, we have a problem. Call me ASAP. Jason. Seriously, everything is locked. Nobody can authenticate. Jason. Bradley is losing his mind. Please call. Angela. Help. System won't accept admin credentials. Prometheus Go Live is in 36 hours. Christopher. This is a disaster. What happened? Latasha. Did they do something to your accounts? Everything stopped working. And then, at 6:47 a.m., from a number I didn't recognize. Ms. Mitchell, this is Bradley Hutchinson. We need to speak immediately regarding a critical systems issue. Call this number. I sipped my coffee and opened my email. The first message from Bradley had arrived at 5:32 p.m. yesterday. Subject: Urgent. System access issue. Catherine, we're experiencing authentication problems with the cloud infrastructure. Please advise on resolution steps. Professional. Almost cordial. The second email, 6:15 p.m. This is time sensitive. Multiple systems are affected. Call my cell immediately. Less cordial. The third email, 7:43 p.m. Your cooperation is required per your separation agreement. Failure to respond may constitute breach of contract. There it was. The threat. I opened my separation agreement PDF, scrolled to Section 7, Subsection 3. Employee agrees to cooperate with reasonable requests for information regarding systems, processes, and projects for a period of 60 days following termination. Reasonable requests. That was the key phrase. I composed a reply. Bradley, I apologize for the delay in responding. Yesterday was unexpectedly difficult, and I needed some personal time to process. Regarding the authentication issues, I recommend checking the system documentation in the repository. All protocols and procedures should be clearly outlined. Best of luck with resolution. Professional. Helpful. Completely useless. Because the documentation didn't include the biometric authentication layer. That had been designed as a security feature, not a standard operational procedure. It existed in a separate security protocol document that was classified as executive-level confidential. A document that only 3 people had access to. Me, the former CTO who'd retired 2 years ago, and the CEO. I hit send.
My phone rang 30 seconds later. Bradley Hutchinson's cell number. I let it ring. It rang again. And again. On the 4th attempt, I answered. Catherine Mitchell. What the hell did you do? No greeting, no pretense of professionalism. I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. The entire cloud infrastructure is locked. Nobody can authenticate. We have clients screaming, migrations halted, and a healthcare go live in 36 hours that's completely dead in the water. That sounds serious, I said. Have you checked the system documentation? Don't patronize me. You did something. Some kind of lock or security protocol. Turn it off. I didn't do anything except what you asked. I left the building and handed over my equipment. If there's a security protocol active, it's functioning as designed by you, as designed by me, approved by the security committee, and implemented according to company policy. It's a failsafe for catastrophic security events. This isn't a security event. This is you sabotaging the company because you're bitter about your termination. I let the silence stretch for a moment. Bradley, I'm going to say this very clearly, and I'd suggest you record it for your legal team. I did not sabotage anything. I did not delete data, corrupt files, or compromise any systems. What you're experiencing is a security protocol that requires elevated authentication during high-risk periods. It's working exactly as intended. Then tell me how to turn it off. I don't work for Tessera Solutions anymore. As of 5 p.m. yesterday, I was terminated. Your separation agreement requires cooperation, and I'm cooperating. I've directed you to the documentation. I've explained the nature of the protocol. If you need additional technical support, I'm happy to consult. My standard rate is $300 per hour, 8-hour minimum, paid in advance. The sound he made wasn't quite a laugh, and wasn't quite a growl. You can't be serious. You terminated my employment 48 hours before a 6-figure vesting event to save the company money. I'm simply applying the same business logic. My expertise has value. If you'd like to purchase it, we can discuss terms. This is extortion. This is capitalism. You're free to solve the problem internally. You have a talented team and comprehensive documentation. I'm sure they'll figure it out. The Prometheus migration is a company responsibility, I interrupted. Not mine. Not anymore. You made that very clear yesterday. Catherine. His voice changed, shifted from anger to something that might have been attempting conciliation. I understand you're upset. Maybe we can discuss the terms of your departure. Revisit some of the details. Like the stock options that vested this morning? Silence. Because they did vest, Bradley. At 7 a.m. today. And according to company policy, only active employees receive vested options. I'm sure HR processed my termination very carefully to ensure I wasn't active at 7 a.m. today. We can work something out. I'm sure you can. With your team. With your documentation. With the resources you claimed were sufficient when you terminated me. Good luck with Prometheus. I ended the call. My hands were shaking. Not from fear. From something else. Something that felt like standing on the edge of a cliff and choosing to jump instead of being pushed. The next call came at 10:30 a.m. Not from Bradley. From Walter Hammond, CEO of Tessera Solutions. I'd interacted with Walter maybe a dozen times in 15 years. He was the kind of executive who dealt with strategy and vision, leaving operations to people like Bradley. But I'd always respected him. He'd built the company from nothing. And he actually understood the technology, at least at a high level. Catherine. His voice was calm, measured. I heard about yesterday. I want to apologize for how that was handled. Apologize for the handling or apologize for the decision? Both, if I'm being honest. I wasn't fully aware of the timing relative to your vesting schedule. That should have been considered. Should have, but wasn't. No. And I take responsibility for that oversight, which is why I'm calling. Bradley mentioned we're experiencing some technical difficulties, and I'm hoping you might be willing to help us resolve them. For $300 an hour, 8-hour minimum. A pause. Is that really where we are? That's where you put us, Walter. You terminated me for business reasons. I'm responding with business reasons. If you value my expertise, compensate it. If you don't, solve the problem another way. The Prometheus migration represents $15 million in annual revenue. If we fail that go live, it could destroy client confidence across our entire healthcare portfolio. Then it sounds like you have a very expensive problem. Catherine, I'm asking for help, not as your former employer, but as someone who's worked in this industry long enough to know that burning bridges hurts everyone. I built those bridges, Walter, every single one, for 15 years. And yesterday, you handed me a severance package and a security escort. Don't talk to me about burning bridges when you're the one who struck the match. What do you want? He asked finally. I want the stock options that vested this morning. $107,000 worth of company equity that I earned over 15 years of service. I want an updated separation agreement that removes the non-compete clause. And I want a formal letter of recommendation on company letterhead, signed by you, acknowledging my contributions. And in exchange, I'll consult on the authentication issue, remotely, and I'll provide limited support for the Prometheus migration through Go Live on Saturday. That's it? That's it. Another pause. Longer this time. I could hear him breathing, thinking, calculating. I need to run this past legal and the board. You have until 5 p.m. today. After that, my price doubles. Catherine, 5 p.m. Walter, business hours. Seems appropriate. I ended the call. The hardest part of negotiation is the waiting, the silence between moves where doubt creeps in and whispers that you've overplayed your hand. I spent the day cleaning my apartment, something I'd neglected for months. Laundry, dishes, organizing bookshelves, mundane tasks that kept my hands busy and my mind from spiraling. My phone continued ringing. Jason called twice more. Angela sent a series of increasingly desperate emails. Christopher texted that Bradley was having a complete meltdown and the office was in chaos. I didn't respond. At 2 p.m., I allowed myself to check the system status remotely. I still had access to basic monitoring tools through my personal accounts, not administrative access, but enough to see system health. Everything was still running. That was the elegant part of the design. Nothing broke. Services continued. Client-facing systems operated normally. But any attempt to make changes, to adapt, to respond to issues, that's where the wall appeared. They were locked in place, forced to maintain the status quo without any ability to evolve. Metaphorically appropriate, I thought. At 3:30, my phone rang. Walter Hammond again. We have an agreement in principle, he said. Legal is drafting updated documents. The stock options will be honored, the non-compete removed, and I'll personally write your letter of recommendation. And we need your help. Today, the Prometheus team is dead in the water. Send me the documents. I'll review them, and if everything is acceptable, I'll provide remote consultations starting tomorrow morning. Catherine, we need help today. Now. The documents, Walter. I'm not providing anything until I have a signed agreement. Surely you understand the importance of paperwork being properly processed. The irony wasn't lost on him. I could hear it in his silence. You'll have them within the hour. The documents arrived at 4:47 p.m., 13 minutes before my deadline. I read every word, every clause, every subsection, every piece of legal language. The stock options, fully vested and transferable. The non-compete, removed entirely. The letter of recommendation stronger than I'd expected, acknowledging my invaluable contributions and instrumental role in building the company's technical infrastructure. At 4:56, I signed electronically and sent them back. At 5:02, Walter called. "We're agreed?" he asked. "We're agreed." "Then please, tell me how to fix this." I walked him through it. The authentication protocol, the biometric layer, the security token requirements. It took 20 minutes to explain, and another 40 to implement the temporary bypass that would restore administrative access. At 6 p.m., I received a text from Jason. "Everything's back. You're a legend." At 6:15, "Angela, we're going to make Prometheus work." "Thank you." At 6:30, "Christopher, Bradley looks like he swallowed a lemon. It's beautiful." I didn't respond to any of them. The Prometheus migration happened that Saturday. I monitored it remotely, provided consultation when needed, and watched as my former team executed flawlessly. 8 hospitals, 43 clinics, 15 years of patient data, all moved successfully to the new infrastructure. They didn't need me, not really. They just needed the chains removed. Monday morning, I received a direct deposit notification. $107,000. My stock options, converted to cash. Tuesday, a LinkedIn connection request from a recruiter at a major tech company. They'd seen Walter's recommendation letter, which he'd posted publicly on my profile. Wednesday, a call from a former client who'd heard I was available for consulting. They had an infrastructure problem and a budget that made my eyes widen. Thursday, I signed my first independent consulting contract. Double my previous salary, flexible hours, and complete creative control over the technical architecture. Friday, exactly 1 week after my termination, I sent a message to my former team. "Thank you for making Prometheus a success. You're more capable than anyone gives you credit for. Don't forget that." Jason responded immediately. "We learned from the best. When you start your own company, call us." I smiled at that. Maybe I would. The thing about being indispensable is that it's both a strength and a trap. For 15 years, I'd been the person who held everything together. The one who knew all the answers, solved all the problems, carried all the weight. They'd taken that for granted until it was gone. But here's what they didn't understand. Being indispensable doesn't mean you can't be replaced. It means replacing you is so painful, so expensive, so disruptive, that it forces everyone to recognize your value. Sometimes you have to let the system break to prove you were holding it together. Bradley Hutchinson lasted another 6 months at Tessera Solutions before taking a voluntary departure to pursue other opportunities. I heard through the network that the board had lost confidence after the Prometheus crisis and several other infrastructure issues that mysteriously appeared in my absence. Walter Hammond sent me a holiday card that December with a handwritten note. "Thank you for your grace under pressure. We didn't deserve it, but we appreciated it." I framed that note, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Systems need maintainers, builders, people who understand the difference between what's documented and what's true. People who care enough to design fail-safes and security protocols, even when nobody's watching. And when those people leave, whether they jump or are pushed, the systems reveal their true fragility. It's been 2 years since that Wednesday in March, 2 years since the conference room, and the severance package, and the encrypted laptop. My consulting practice is thriving. I have clients across 3 continents, projects that challenge me in ways the corporate structure never allowed, and the flexibility to choose who I work with and on what terms. I've hired 4 employees, all people I knew from previous lives, talented engineers who were undervalued, overlooked, or pushed out by companies that didn't recognize what they had. We don't have stock options. We have profit sharing. We don't have at-will employment. We have contracts that respect both parties. We don't have forced overtime. We have realistic timelines and adequate resources. I learned what mattered from 15 years of seeing what didn't. Sometimes I think about that moment in the conference room when Bradley said, "We're downsizing," with that almost smile. Sometimes I wonder if he knew what he was setting in motion. If he understood that saving the company $100,000 in stock options would cost them millions in lost productivity, client confidence, and institutional knowledge? Probably not. People like Bradley think in quarterly reports and cost-benefit analyses. They don't think in systems or consequences, or the human expertise that makes everything else possible. I don't hate him. I don't even think about him much anymore. But I remember the lesson. Your value isn't determined by how well you're treated when you're useful. It's revealed by what happens when you're gone. Make yourself valuable. Document your worth. Build your own safety nets. And never ever assume loyalty flows both directions in a system designed for efficiency over equity. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt your contributions overlooked or your value underestimated, I hope you'll consider subscribing. We're building a community of voices and stories that matter, and we'd love to have you as part of reaching our next milestone of 2,000 subscribers. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for believing that everyone's experience deserves to be heard.